Today we're going to talk about the new moon. The new moon is going to occur on the 27th of April. At 1932, which is 7:32 p.m. Universal Time, the sun and the moon will join together in Taurus. And as you can see on this chart, it will occur at 7 degrees and 47 minutes in this sign, Taurus. There is here a strong configuration involving, of course, this conjunction Sun-Moon with Pluto opposite Mars, and here we have an opposition as well with Vesta, and the Black Moon, which is not far from Vesta. That's an important element to consider, because it represents a dark zone, something that we don't really know, that we don't really want to know, perhaps, something that's hidden, something we're ashamed of, maybe, for some of us anyway. And it is happening in Scorpio here, which is the sign represented by Pluto. So there is a link that is reinforced due to the fact that these two elements, Vesta is an asteroid that orbits between Mars and Jupiter, and the Black Moon is just a fictitious point which is actually linked to the orbit of the Moon around the Earth, in relation with the Sun, of course. So what happens here is very strong. And that means that on the 27th of April, because the new moon represents the beginning of a new cycle, my advice is not to rush into whatever you want to begin, whatever you want to start, or however you want to or need to react to something that would be happening in your life, because the opposition Mars-Pluto can make us quite radical, and perhaps a bit too hectic in the manner in which we're going to deal with the facts of life. And the sun and the moon, of course, are the two main elements. They represent the pole through which the vital energy passes. And when there is a conjunction between the two, there is a risk of short circuits due to the fact that both poles, you got two wires to bring electricity to anything that you want to get to work. And if you touch both wires, what's going to happen? You're going to blow a fuse, and find yourself in the dark. So the darkness is represented by the Black Moon here, and Vesta represents harmony, balance, and obviously well-being that will be emanating from this harmony and balance. But Mars and Pluto, although it's not drawn on this chart, are also in discordance with Vesta and with the Black Moon, and even more with the Black Moon, because the Black Moon is at 3 degrees and 32 minutes in Scorpio, and Pluto is at 3 degrees and 45 minutes in Scorpio, and Mars is at 4 degrees in Scorpio. So there is here an element of square, as we call it, because it is a 90-degree angle, and there is another one here. So the Black Moon will play a very important role. And that means, because it represents what we don't know, what we ignore, what we don't want to see, what we don't want to accept, perhaps, reacting on the basis of something that we don't really know leads to potential mistakes. And mistakes could be quite important, have quite important repercussions in our life. So my advice is to try and take it easy on that particular day. But I would say most probably during the whole transit of the moon in Taurus, which is going to last 2.5 days. Here we have the conjunction at 7 degrees, almost 8 degrees in the sign. 8 degrees, that is 16 hours. So 16 hours before, which is about 3:30 in the morning, the moon enters in Taurus and begins that period of new moon. And it's going to last for 2.5 days. So it's very important to take that into consideration to avoid getting involved in something new or trying to change something that you don't agree with in a manner that would lead to excess or excessive reactions and perhaps important mistakes that we could make, all of us. It's true that it may involve more people born under the sign of Taurus, Aquarius, where Pluto is, Leo, where Mars is, and Scorpio, where the Black Moon and Vesta are. Those 4 signs are going to be much more directly concerned by what I've just said. But we all have something in those signs. It may be a planet, maybe an element, it could be a house that's for sure. So the house represents certain areas of our life, and that is probably in those areas that the energy of this configuration will take place. If we draw the lines here between Pluto and Vesta and the Black Moon, if we draw the line between Mars, Vesta, and the Black Moon, we have a great square cross and a cross in the middle, which represents something that will most probably take advantage of us in the way that it represents a tendency to be influenced by those 4 or 5 elements, planets, and even 6 if we consider the moon, of course. But the moon is not going to stay there very long. 2.5 days, that's a whole time that it will take to go through Taurus. But still, it will have that triggering effect on something that may be in the air, more or less, since much before, perhaps since the last new moon. But of course, the more we are advised about this configuration, the better we can protect ourselves from what it may bring, because that may also bring something in the world at large, like weather-wise, but the Earth as well itself may be affected by this kind of configuration. And of course, people and politics, if we consider that politics may be influenced by this type of configuration, it's not going to ease the relationship between countries. Some countries, in any case, which may find themselves in a situation that is not very positive for themselves, for that country itself, or for the people of this country. And that may become a source of, conflicts, disagreements, to say the least, and conflicts and perhaps wars to the extreme. And extremes are represented by this type of configuration here, the opposition between Mars and Pluto, which will be triggered by the arrival of the moon, but which is already in action since the sun is in Taurus, naturally. And that has begun on the 20th of April. So the moon is going to carry on around the zodiac, and the next transit that we can see is when it reaches Uranus. And you see here, well, it's much different. The overall situation may bring a positive change. And if we agree on the change, it could be a change that will bring a much more positive repercussions. Because we have here what we call a trine with Pluto. And Pluto is regeneration. And Pluto is in Uranus' sign. Uranus represents Aquarius, where Pluto is. And the link here is what we call a false aspect, because Uranus is in Taurus. It needs to be in Gemini for the aspect to be really strong. But the potential is there. Although this trine is more, resembles more a square, which is a discordance. But it is a trine, if we agree on the number of degrees that are necessary to call it a trine. And a trine is a positive configuration. But it may look like it is not positive to change. If the change is represented by Uranus, we may feel quite uneasy about it. Perhaps there will be a promise of something positive emanating from the change, but we may doubt that it will actually bring that positive result. So it will be for us to decide, but it may not be easy to decide because we will feel that it is hiding something. It's not clear. It looks good, but deep down, we may feel that it's not so good. Or we may feel that it is 100% good, but it is hiding something. So beware of that. There is a link here, which is what we call a sextile, with the conjunction, this triple conjunction here, the North Lunar Node, Saturn, and Venus. Pretty positive, yes, for sure. And that is a true aspect. It's not a hidden aspect or a false one, no, because here we have water sign, and an earth sign, and they're very mixable elements, very constructive, earth and water. So what we have here is the North Lunar Node that indicates toward which sort of situation or goal we should be tending to go. And Saturn represents what we can realize concretely and durably. And Venus is love and creativity. So creativity is going to be enhanced, and perhaps imagination as well, which will most probably come into play to bring the positive change that we are hoping for or aiming at. And that will be on the 29th of April. And it will be just after midnight, 15 minutes after midnight on that particular day. So very early, very, very early in the morning. But if you're, of course, west of Greenwich or the universal timeline, then it will be on the 28th during the evening or the night, depending on where you are on the planet, of course. So work it out, because if you have to make a decision, it may be a good idea to do so exactly on that time and day, whatever it is for you. And then the moon progresses and it reaches Jupiter. And Jupiter represents expansion, evolution, progress, success. So there will be on the 30th of April, at about 5 in the afternoon, a potential evolution of our situation. Your situation, mine as well, I mean, it does represent an opportunity. Now, how many of us are going to take advantage of such opportunity? How many of us are going to recognize it as an opportunity and not just something benign? Well, that's for you to decide, of course. That's for everyone to decide. But we have here a very strong influence of Jupiter in Gemini that actually stems through that of Mercury, because Mercury represents Gemini. And Mercury is here in Aries. So Aries is a sign that is in harmony with Gemini through the elements that are represented by both signs. Here we have fire in Aries, and here we have air in Gemini. And fire and air do cohabit very well. I mean, fire wouldn't be able to burn without air. So the complicity between both signs is very strong. And but it doesn't mean, of course, that a Gemini person can cope with the attitude of an Aries person and vice versa. That goes much further into the reading of both charts. But elements-wise, there is a potential positive link between both signs. So Mercury is going to be in agreement with Jupiter, and it's going to enhance the energy of Jupiter, wanting to learn. That is what it represents, wanting to communicate about what we know, what we've learned, or what we've discovered, and wanting to go somewhere to discover something. So communication is going to come into play, and your intellect as well is going to have a very strong influence on what happens on that particular day and time. And once again, the moon and the transits of the moon, when it happens to be a conjunction with an element around the zodiac, represents a moment to choose, to decide. You know, because it does trigger the energy of Jupiter on that particular day and time. It triggers the potential evolution and progress. So it's for you to decide now what you're going to do, but decisions are represented by Aries, because Aries is a sign represented by Mars, and Mars represents evolution, not evolution, decisions, I mean. And there is a link here with Chiron, representing health. So there is a potential also, a potential benefit to our health. And it can be our health as such, but it can be health in some area of our lives. That will depend on where certain houses are falling in your chart, naturally. And that will have a very strong influence on the opportunity to get better, to be better, and to obtain better results as well. And then we have here a square configuration, which is a 90, almost a 90-degree angle or about, with this conjunction here. So Saturn represents the brakes. If you imagine a car, for example, or if you imagine your life as your existential vehicle, and in that vehicle you have the accelerator and you have the brakes. We need to use both, naturally, from time to time. So the brakes are going to be applied to the energy of Jupiter. And Jupiter is going to apply its own energy to the brakes. So that means that braking is going to be very strong. And it may slow you down or feel that you could really not be advantaged by this opportunity that I mentioned before. And it may become a bit difficult to choose whether to be reasonable and to keep the status quo, you know, not wanting to change anything by the fact that you may fear the repercussions of such a change or such a potential opportunity. Is it really an opportunity, or is it something that is going to increase the load of work, for example, and the load of responsibilities to deal with? That is a question. And it's for you to answer the question, of course. But Saturn represents your potential to assess concretely and in a rational manner the situation. And if you do so, then you will be able to decide and to make the right choice. Shall I go forward or shall I wait and see? It's for you to decide. But you see, the North Lunar Node represents that to which we should be tending to go. And during this period, we will be tending to go toward the energy of Saturn because it is very near the position of the North Lunar Node. So Saturn represents what we can do to achieve a durable result, and preferably, of course, a positive one. Venus is next to not far. It's almost changing sign. You see, it's at 30 degrees in Pisces. So a few minutes later, it is transiting in Aries, which is going to make it different as far as its own influence is concerned. But Venus represents love and it represents creativity. If you're an artist, I mean, you're going to feel that difference, you know. Are you going to remain the same and keep on creating the way you've always created? Or are you going to take advantage of a potential opportunity to progress in the right direction? And love-wise, it's the same, you know. Are you going to remain the same and keep on loving the same person in the same way you've always did? Or are you going to take the opportunity to progress in that relationship and to make it much more valuable to you and to the other person or other people concerned? You know, so Venus may play a very important part because it is nearing the end in Pisces and nearing the conjunction, the true conjunction with Venus, with Neptune, which is going to occur, well, maybe at 5:30 or something like that. You know, so half an hour later, Venus is in Aries, and the conjunction between Venus and Neptune will enhance our imagination. And that's very interesting and important if you're an artist. It's very important as well if you're in love or if you need creativity in some way to progress in life. So consider that day, the 30th of April, at about 5 in the afternoon, universal time, of course, once again, as being a moment to choose, to decide on which way you're going to go. Are you going to go toward the reasonable energy of Saturn, or are you going to embrace this opportunity represented by Jupiter, opportunity to progress and to succeed? That's a big question. And then the moon is going to carry on, and it will reach a couple of days and more later, on the 4th, actually, of April, 4th of May, the position of Mars. And it will be just midnight, you know, the beginning of the day. So it will be late in the afternoon or evening if you live west of the universal timeline. Now, Mars, as I said earlier on, is opposite Pluto, and it creates here a square with Vesta, which is drawn because it's a much narrower aspect than previously. And there is also one with the black moon. This one is not drawn, but it should be. It's just that the computer didn't do it. So anyway, what I mentioned about this new moon in Taurus and the risk of being too hastily reacting and getting involved in conflicts or maybe feeding a potential conflict. And that is, of course, for every one of us to take into consideration, but it may also involve whole countries. Politics will be much more influenced by these type of configurations. What we don't know for sure should not become a reason to react in any way above a certain level of realism and, being realistic and being reasonable about what is happening. Because the black moon is there to make things much more blurry. Dark for sure, because whatever we don't know, we may fear. But what we ignore cannot make us fear anything, because we ignore. So what we want to ignore, what we prefer to ignore, we do so to protect ourselves, more or less, or at least to protect our peace of mind. But due to the opposition between Mars and Pluto, the overall situation in the world is quite tensed, and the notion of war is represented by this type of configuration. Mars is the god of war, and Pluto is the god of death. And as we know, all war brings death. So the opposition between the two is also something that should be taken into consideration on our individual level, not to get too quickly involved in anything that we want for ourselves, or we want to impose, or we want to react to oppose something that we don't agree with, and so on. Because that will disturb our peace of mind, our well-being, our balance, and the harmony that we need in our life. And here, the sun represents the life potential. The sun is life. So it is not square Pluto, although the signs are forming a square between themselves. The potential influence of Pluto is there, and it is emphasized by that of Mars, which is, of course, triggered by the moon. So let's be very careful on that day and time. Work out the time and the day, because, as I said earlier on, if you were born west of the universal timeline, the event is going to occur on the 3rd of May, not on the 4th. But if you're east of this timeline, then it will for sure occur on the 4th. Work out the time, it's very important. I mean, at midnight, a lot of people are in bed sleeping, but it doesn't stop anything drastic happening around them. So just take that into consideration. If you have to make a decision, try to make it thanks to the positive energy of Neptune and Venus. As you can see, they're forming a trine with the conjunction between the moon and Mars. And the trine is a very positive aspect. Neptune represents the spiritual dimension of life. And Venus is love. And love is going to save the world. Love is going to stop the wars. And love is going to allow you to achieve maybe your dream situation. And perhaps it will also give you enough inspiration to create something that will make the difference in your life, that will change your life, that will make it better. And perhaps for a long time, perhaps forever. So consider that date and time as being extremely important, because on one side, you have a very positive energy that calls on peace, love, and well-being. And on the other side, you have that turmoil represented by the configurations involving Mars, Pluto, Vesta, the black moon, and the sun. And then the next transit of the moon is when it reaches the south lunar node. The south lunar node, once again, represents that from which we should try and detach ourselves, let go of. We've done it enough, we know it, we've gone through the whole process. The situation is maybe interesting or has been, but if we keep doing what we've done for a long time, we may slow ourselves down because the call is coming from the north lunar node, which is across. But it is next to Saturn, and Saturn represents time. So we may need a bit more time to decide on what we have to let go of. But once it's done, it's done. You need to then go toward the north lunar node, and Saturn represents the realism of the situation and the concrete and long-lasting results that you may benefit from. If you are ready to make the necessary effort and work to obtain that result, to reach that goal. Because Saturn may represent something like a mountain that you need to climb. And it may be a real mountain, but it most probably is a symbolic mountain that you need to climb. You need to reach the top, and the top is represented by the north lunar node. And once you've done that, you're on the top of the world, more or less. It is success. And it's a success that will perdure for a long time because Saturn represents time. That's all there is to it. And there is also a very positive link stemming from the Sun and Uranus. Uranus and the Sun changing your life or changing your way of life. The potential is there, but it will depend on how much you can let go of, how much you can detach yourself from what you've taken the habit of doing, which is not in the air anymore. It's not in, like we used to say. So fashion is changing. Fashion is change. And when you change, the way you dress, the way you make yourself up, the way you present yourself, it is because the whole of society is more or less changing in that direction. So to keep in tune with the rest of society around you, you adopt a certain fashion, a certain way of being, of talking, and of, dressing yourself and so on. And the change may be very favorable. So there is an opportunity to change that may actually be very visible on that day, although it is 9 in the evening, universal time, on the 7th of May, 2025, at about 9 in the evening. The potential change calls for a concrete action, concrete decision. But Jupiter is in discordance. There is what we call a square here. And Jupiter is also in discordance with Saturn and the north lunar node. So beware on that day of what seems too good to be true. Because it may seem to be too good to be true, but it may not be too good to be true, if you see what I mean. And that will be, once again, for you to decide. The Sun and Uranus are showing how much imagination you can put into what you want to change. And perhaps that will give you the answer as to whether Jupiter represents what is too good to be true, or whether it represents what is really not too good to be true, what is really what it is. If you need more information about this, according to your situation or your life and so on, and of course according to your chart, your birth chart, don't hesitate to visit our website, and we'll see what we can do for you. You can ask a question about this situation, and we'll make sure that we can answer so that we can help you decide in the best possible manner. Then what happens? Well, the moon arrives at the longitude of the black moon and then Vesta. And that will be on the 11th of May at 9 in the morning. This triple conjunction is going to last for much more than just a moment. Because as soon as the moon enters in Scorpio, which will occur actually 12 hours before, around 12 hours, it could be even 13 hours before this time and date, the moon is going to trigger and begin to trigger the energy of the black moon and Vesta. And that could represent a moment when we actually discover what was hidden. You know, as I said earlier on the day of the new moon, there will be an opposition between the sun, the moon, and this asteroid here, Vesta, and the black moon, square Pluto, square Mars, and so on. Now, we find here the square from Mars and the square from Pluto, of course, and the opposition with Mercury. And Mercury represents our brains. So there is something that's going to show on that day. But the light of the moon is not as strong as the light of the sun. The moon derives its own life and light from the sun. So what you see when you look at the moon shining is just the rays of the sun. Now, because it is almost a full moon, the full moon occurs just afterwards, on the 12th of May. So the day after that conjunction, the moon is full. So it will be almost full on the 11th of May. And that will give us enough light, I would say, to see and to recognize that dark zone, what it is. What is it for you? And what is it maybe for the world? But Vesta is next to that black moon, and it is also going to be triggered by the transit of the moon. And because we are near the full moon, the emotions are much stronger. And if we are too emotional about what is going on, we may make a mountain of a molehill, you know. So something that is not so important at all actually could appear to be much more important. You know, during the night when there is a very small amount of light to see where you're going, forms and colors are really different than in full daylight, naturally. So it seems that we could misunderstand the value and the meaning of the black moon and of that dark zone. And if we exaggerate its value, we may make a mistake, you know, and react very suddenly, Mars, Pluto, very radically perhaps, and wrongly as far as our intellect is concerned, because our intellect will be influenced by the energy of Pluto, the fear of death or the fear of losing everything, for example, the fear of distraction, and Mars, the fear of war, the fear of retaliation, the fear of aggression, and so on. So we need to be really careful on that day and time to avoid making mistakes. And the influence of the moon is going to last until after the full moon. See, the full moon will occur on the 12th of May at here 4:56 in the afternoon universal time. And this is the chart that I will analyze, of course, when I come around to be able to do so. I'm very busy at the moment, and I seem to have great difficulties to keep up with the work that I have to do. But today I'm doing this reading of the new moon, and most probably on the day of the new moon or a bit afterwards, I will analyze this chart of the full moon. But during the transit of the moon in Scorpio, which is going to last for 2.5 days, tensions are going to increase. Just remember that. And if you lose balance, which is represented by Vesta, well, try and be more reasonable about the way you're going to react to recover this balance, or to protect or preserve or defend yourself and your peace of mind, because that could go actually against that same peace of mind. But I will analyze this chart for you in due time, as soon as I can. Promise. I thank you very much for watching this video. I wish you a very nice new moon. Take it easy and take care. Bye for now.